beautiful basketball court lights painted on it. Yeah.
I'd like to call the city council meeting to order for September 8th and welcome everybody. It's nice to see so many faces here. And the first thing we'll do is have a flag salute. The pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a roll call
Mayor Sproul,
here.
President Brungard.
Here.
Councilor Drebin,
President.
Councilor Gilgan is excused. Councilor Goulart. Present. Councilor Newman.
Here.
And Councilor Paulson.
Here.
You have 6 councilors present, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Okay, Madam, I think you're up.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. I've got your August numbers. And I'll just run them down like I normally do. Holler if you have any questions, and then I'll tell you the totals at the end. Calls this month or last month were 3 abandoned vehicle calls, 4 alarm calls, 2 animal bites, 6 animal nuisance calls, 1 area check, 3 disabled vehicles, 5 assist outside agency, so either fire, medics, or somebody else, 1 public assist, 3 burglaries, 12 civil complaints, 29 civil papers, 3 criminal mischief, 5 custodial interferences, 3 details, so like this, DHS calls, there were 4, there was 1 disturbance, 10 domestics, 3 drug violations, 1 DUI, 1 dumping complaint, 1 elder abuse, 5 extra patrols, 19 field investigations, so stopping and talking to people, 27 follow-ups, 1 found child, 3 fraud calls, 1 harassment, 9 information calls, someone calling for information, needing information, 2 medical assists, 2 missing persons, 8 noise complaints, 4 ordinances, 3 parking complaints, 1 premise unsecure, which could be an open garage door, open window, something like that, 1 property lost and found, 1 pursuit that went through the town, 3 reckless drivers, 1 recovered stolen vehicle, 1 suicidal, 23 suspicious calls, 4 thefts, 1 traffic complaint, 3 traffic crashes in the city, 3 traffic hazards, 97 traffic stops, 3 trespass, 1 unwanted, 3 warrant service, and 5 welfare checks. There's a total of 336 calls in August. 61.6% of them were taken by your Lafayette contracts, so Deputy Meade and myself. And 38.4 was handled by either Rural Patrol or OSP detectives who do a lot of the DHS calls.
I think you hit some records there
Yeah.
with your traffic stopped and maybe a number of calls.
Quick question.
Yep.
Is there a more specific time for the suspicious calls? Because that sounded like a large number of suspicious calls.
It was significantly higher.
That's what I thought. So is there like a
was.
time frame that those are coming in?
I can double check for you, but I don't know off the top of my head.
That's just information that I would like to know, because that's such a huge increase. So
Yeah.
is that,
And that doesn't tell you whether myself or Deputy Meade have seen something suspicious and said, hey, I've got something suspicious, I need to be out with it, or somebody actually called in and said there's somebody or something suspicious.
okay.
That number doesn't tell me. I can go back and look if you want an actual.
Well,
like,
if you could share
differentiate.
that information, especially when there's a large number jump like that.
Yep,
That would be
absolutely.
fabulous. At least I'm pretty sure the rest of the council would like to know that information.
I will make that note and do that from now on.
Okay,
Absolutely. Yep. Anything else?
Our car's starting to slow down.
Yeah, they're getting stopped if they're not, so hence the
Yeah,
traffic
definitely.
stops. Yeah. Mhm. But I have seen significant slowing, which is nice.
Do you know what the percentage of tickets written on the 97?
I don't, but I can see what I can come up with for you on that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay.
Anybody else
Do
questions?
you all have any questions? Anybody in the gallery have any questions? Okay,
All righty.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the minutes for the 2 meetings, June 23rd. And let me just, the other 3 meetings. The 3 meetings? Okay, June 23rd. August 4th.
July 14th in the middle.
This is it, okay, great. So July 14th is in the middle. Do we have anybody that had any changes or questions about the 3
On the August one, I had a question. Let me find the page.
okay.
Sorry, it was about the ballot measure for the mushrooms. Okay, yeah, page 3 of 6 or 18 on the packet. So it talks about an emergency clause being the reason for a couple of things. And we were trying to do 2 things at that meeting: pass an ordinance with 1 reading, but also have an emergency clause on it.
Mhm.
And the charter specifies if you're trying to pass an ordinance with 1 reading, that's why it has to be read in its entirety.
Mhm.
And also it has to be unanimous for it to be passed in 1 reading.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's that same requirement level for emergency, right? For adding an emergency that says it takes effect now, not in 30 days.
Mhm.
So do we also have to be unanimous for an emergency clause?
I don't know. Preston, do
I
you?
can let you know on that. You're right, this one was both. The one reading and,
Right, but
but yeah,
but the wrong reasons given from what I understand. And that's where I guess we need the. Right, because it should say it was written in its entirety because it was trying to be passed in one reading, not because it was an emergency clause on there.
Okay, so we need to change that, read the ordinance in its entirety because of,
Because of attempting to pass it in one. With only one reading. But again, if it's also an emergency clause, then we should say for those two reasons, not just say emergency clause and leave the other one out.
so you want that whole sentence rewritten?
Depending on what we find out.
Okay.
Right, and because here's the thing, if it had been. It has to be unanimous for an emergency clause, then yes, it has to be unanimous no matter what. If it's only because it had to have a second reading or because it was trying to be passed in first reading. The council could have met a week later, had a second reading and passed it normally.
Mhm.
But that didn't happen. Nobody pursued that. Nobody brought that up. But that's where understanding the difference between emergency or one reading is important.
Okay, well, then I think what we should do is take the August 4th minutes and set them aside and not pass them. And have Preston bring the answer to that question next time. How does
Do
that
that.
sound?
sure.
Okay, what about June and July? Did anybody have any questions or problems with that? With those?
No, I didn't think so.
Okay, so I need a motion for the June 23rd and the 14th of July.
I move to approve the city council meeting minutes from June 23rd, 2022. Read them separately.
Mhm.
And July 14th, 2022.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay. All opposed? Okay, there's no opposed, so those are taken care of.
At least two of us ready.
Well, at least we're moving forward, because now we only have just this last meeting. Okay, the next one that we have is to award the Adams Street Water Project, and I'm gonna ask.
Additions or deletions or citizen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. That's what happens when I don't have one in front of me. Okay, any additions or deletions from the agenda?
Is this on? Are we
No, but
streaming?
we don't have anybody on Zoom.
Is it streaming to YouTube? Because that was agreed upon by the council.
I believe he came over here and started. The blue lights.
It does say live on YouTube, so
The camera's up high. The camera's
it's
high.
hard to know when the.
We just turned the screen off so we didn't have to look at it all the time.
Okay.
Watch ourselves.
Yes.
It's distracting.
I just haven't tried to pull my hair too much.
Yes,
Okay,
we are.
no additions or deletions to the agenda, okay? Any citizen input on non-agenda items? Leah.
I still need to state my address. Leah Harper, 241 East 16th Street. Been a long time since I've been in this room. I came because I wanted to say thank you. I know what you guys do. It's a pretty thankless job. And you usually hear just the flack, what you're doing wrong and not what you're doing right. And many of these faces I don't know, but some of you I do. And I just wanted to say, Marie, I know I've known you for almost the whole time I've lived in this city. And the whole time I've lived here, you've been working tirelessly, not just as a counselor and a mayor, but as a resident. You've been working for the city and for the citizens and for the parks. And I want to say thank you. And it was a job well done.
Thank you.
And I know that Preston, you're retiring. And, I was part of the hiring process for you. And, we didn't always agree on things, but I have appreciated your professionalism and your, you've been a friend and a mentor to my son and a great administrator for the city and pushing things forward. And I just wanted to come and say thank you for serving. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed working with you on council too, and I even now am glad that you're active in the LCAP because I think you'll add a lot to that organization.
Yeah,
You
Hope
do.
so. Hope so. Anyway, that's it. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay, now I think I haven't forgotten anything, so I think we can move on to the award, the Adams Street Water Project. Would you like to give us the staff report on that, Preston?
Sure, Your Honor. This is a project we were hoping to complete in the spring, but everybody was contractors were busy and we didn't find anybody wanting to bid. So we had to wait till more towards the end of the summer. But this is an important piece to complete the looping of our systems downtown for water. We ran 8-inch lines across 3rd Street, and those were connected on 3 points. This is the 4th one on North Adams there. So this completes that looping. And the bids are attached. The lowest responsible bidder was Howard at $56,620, and so we recommend council approve that project.
Has the engineer taken a look at the bid?
Oh, yes.
And so he thinks that even though there's a $40,000 difference between the first and second, that we're getting the same work?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
he had estimated the project quite a bit higher than the bid, but there's no problems with the contractor, and they're perfectly capable of doing the project. And so they are the lowest responsible bidder.
Why is trench lines so much higher? I mean, that's almost $100,000.
I think they don't want to do it.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
wondering.
you know.
Well, I think they're busy and it's not worth it to them. So if they're kind of probably thinking that if we were desperate to award, they might get it. That's just my 2 cents. There's always one of those pretty much on every project, and it's just.
Where they don't really want to do the
Way out
jump, so
there.
they've been it really, really high because we're a small city. So I have to say that so far, with a few minor things, Haworth has done a fabulous job with all of our small little projects for our city.
Well, most construction companies of any size, this is too small of a job for them. They won't even move their equipment out for this. Yeah. So, and Hallworth, I think, has stuff around that's already here and working on other jobs, and I think that's why we can get it cheaper. Yeah, or less expensive.
Moving equipment is a heavy expense for all of these projects.
Could you talk a little bit about the necessity of this? I mean, I see it says here that it's important for water quality and fire flow. Are we lacking fire flow? Quality, if you say, hey, putting in 230 feet of pipe is going to increase the quality, residents across the town are going to say, our water's worse, or there's no increase in quality. So, what's the necessity of it happening now versus in a year or two or not, and putting $56,000 towards something else? I know the ARPA funds are limited, but they could be used to pay for something that frees up our other funds for, 56,000, that's what the cost of raising the rates was going to get for both water and sewer for a year. So this is not an insignificant amount of money. Why is it necessary?
To improve water quality and complete the looping system for that 8-inch line across 3rd Street. And in terms of the water quality, it eliminates the dead end line, which we don't have to maintain if it's part of a looped system. And when you loop it like that with our mains, if we had a fire downtown, the fire flow would come from the whole general area instead of just certain streets where the water comes from. So looping is important for fire flow. It doesn't increase the gallons per minute, but it spreads out that increase over a much larger area. So you can more effectively fight a fire if it's looped.
So is this the only looping that still needs to happen
Correct.
in the whole city?
No, there's other places where crossing of the 3rd Street could occur. But not in the downtown area, but further out, like the industrial piece on the east side of the city, serving that with utilities, making that shovel ready. There's water and sewer that could be looped across Highway 30 in the future.
Highway 99.
Pardon me. I said Highway 30. Oh my
Yes.
God.
What town are you thinking of?
When you said 30, I'm instantly thinking of Gaston or Carlton or somewhere else.
What are the yearly costs associated with maintaining the line currently, the way it's?
The dead end line?
We periodically go out and flush all of our dead end lines in the city.
Is that expensive?
No, it's time consuming and it's wasteful for water, but it's got to get done. So when you see us out, creating water on our streets and all, well, that's what we're doing. We are flushing those lines.
We have to do that once a year?
No, it's more frequent than that. I'd have to check with Greg, our public works supervisor, but it's more frequent than that, yes.
Do you know how many gallons we lose per flush?
It's not a whole lot, but it's something that we do track, and we count that toward our production, and use every month when we tally up our production and consumption reports.
What's the break even period on that 56,000?
Break even period, what do you mean?
Yeah, so the cost to maintain it as is versus upgraded. How long will it take to spend $56,000 to maintain the system as is versus upgrading it? Is that a matter of a couple of years or is that decades?
Well, I think that would probably be more several years. But the cost, this is a good investment to improve our firefighting ability to downtown and improve the water quality. So I don't cost it out. It's an important improvement, and yeah, it will save time and money over time, but the public benefit of having good water quality and good fire flow downtown by having loop systems is important.
Be hard to quantify if you don't know when there's gonna be a fire.
Or if you
How
don't do any
effective?
kind of analysis at all, right? Yeah.
It's really hard to quantify that number, in my opinion, like to try.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because there's been no analysis of financially, you can say something's important, but how important? If we've got other looping systems planned for other parts of the town. Do we have a looping system comprehensive plan that you can present to the council? Are we subpar downtown and we're gonna bring it up that everywhere else is the same, or are we gonna use the same argument later that says, well, we'll get better pressure if we do it over here too? You're nickel and diming the funds versus saying the comprehensive plan is going to cost $10 million to do it. This is phase 1 of 20 or whatever. I just don't agree with it. You haven't given me a reason to see that it's necessary. Yeah, it's important to have good infrastructure, but you have to be able to support that beyond just saying it's important for water quality and fire flow.
Yeah, well, this is something that's been budgeted. It's been on our CIP. The budget committee approved it, and we moved forward on it. It's an important project for downtown. It's not part of a phased plan to address every dead end line in the city.
But it is the last phase of the 3rd Street improvement resurfacing part of this project.
Correct.
It is the last
Yes.
part of it.
Correct.
Didn't we have some issues with the broken lines a few years ago? I think when Jim was here, that we had some bacteria or something because of the dead end lines and had to be flushed specially or something?
Yeah, several years ago, It dissolved chlorine compounds can accumulate in dead end lines. And so we upped our maintenance program, and that's been followed ever since.
So by looping this would just take another one out of your maintenance side without, which would save your employees time.
It is. This is something that we installed with the Highway 30 project. We
99.
I think you got 3rd Street versus, on your mind.
Well, it is, and having been ill for a while and got some effects with that, I'm still getting the senses and everything, but
And this money is coming from the ARPA, so it's not it's not taking away anything that's budgeted for right now.
correct. That was approved by this council to fund with ARPA funds. It's one of the few projects to pursue. We just couldn't get it done the end of last fiscal year because we didn't have any bidders. So it can get done now. Yes.
Any more discussion?
I'd like to see a comprehensive plan of everything that needs to happen for looping. Apparently we don't have one, but even a list of saying, we need to address this. Because again, it's hard to absorb one after another if you don't have a plan to say, where are we on the progress?
I'm sure that, after this is handled, that Preston can give us a list of where the future looping needs to be done.
Okay.
Do we have any idea how many throughout the city?
I don't have any idea. I don't know where the dead ends are at. That's the Public Works. They know.
It's about 20.
So this will on phase one of 20. Well, I don't support this right now. I might be in support of it after I see what that plan looks like.
Thank you for your input. I support this. It's just one step. It's just one step toward a better water system for us. And if we can get it for $56,000, I think we've done pretty good. But that's my opinion.
Why are we focusing on this dead end and not others or all of them together?
Well, because this is a significant main, an 8-inch main that serves our downtown. And it was all intended to do. We didn't have the money when we relocated facilities, prior to ODOT coming in. We didn't have enough money to complete the 4 legs of those 2 8-inch lines across third. So the idea was to come back after the project and finish it.
I remember that.
Can ARPA funds be used? I know ARPA funds have to go to specific purposes. Infrastructure is one of them. Can they be used to pay off debt associated with infrastructure? Say our McMinnville intertie program that we're going to have a big deficit on.
I don't believe that you can use it to pay off debt.
How would we find that out
I've
for
never
sure?
heard of anybody being able to do
But
that.
it goes towards infrastructure though, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
but
thought
this
we use it for projects.
this is for infrastructure in the future, creating, not past.
okay. I mean, we're still paying it off, so it's pretty recent. I understand your point. I just,
No.
it'd be nice to know if we could or not, because if we can, that would help, make up for some of the huge deficit we're going from paying like 50 or 60 a year to 100 and something or 200 something.
Well, if I remember correctly, that infrastructure money came from the general fund, didn't it? And it's at a very low interest rate.
That's the internal loan.
Yeah, so the internal loan, it's internal loan, so we're paying ourselves back with a very low rate.
Correct.
So it really wouldn't do us much good to put
That's
that.
not the intertie though. That's separate, right?
No, the intertie is, isn't the intertie the money that we borrowed from the general fund to pay for it?
Part of it. The other part was from Mac Water and Light.
Yeah.
Which was
You
higher.
got two loans there. You got one from Mac Mac Water and Light, excuse me.
Which is the big one.
Yeah, which is the big one. And then you have the 600, I think it's 600,000, wasn't it?
I think so.
From the
Okay.
general fund, and that's an interest
Yeah.
rate so low, I wouldn't touch it.
It was very specific and it was like in rooms and things,
Okay.
but couldn't really, and that's where I was concerned about even using anything with it connected to the water type. Because I thought, well, we've already started.
Hmm. Maybe this project's between certain timelines too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something about.
And the mayor's asked me to do an ARPA item for discussion next month. The city did receive, late last month, the second half of our ARPA monies. The same as the year before, so that was good. It's been received. And so I can, lay that out, what's spent, what's available, and again, then answer the question about the debt, but if I remember too, yeah, you can't use it to pay the debt, but we will confirm that next month.
Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion? Okay,
Can I ask you a question?
you sure can.
Thank you. I'm a little confused. What I heard was that you borrow money from yourselves and you charge interest at a low rate to yourselves. It seems like borrowing from your own accounts is raising your costs by an interest rate.
You've got to remember that the water fund is an enterprise fund. It's a completely separate fund that has to support its own self. It's not part of the general fund. Okay, so as far as that goes, the general fund is like a lending institution to us. Okay, and the interest rate that's charged is, what is it? It's
I think it was 1%, but something like that.
It just,
I know.
I couldn't get it
I know.
together. And
You know-
I'm shaking my head.
Yeah, and we had to,
Oh, I'm sorry. Michael, you need to step to the podium and give us your name and address.
Now,
Yes, I forgot to ask you to do that first.
Michael Shaw, 1127 Ridge Loop.
Yeah, and that's why we have that loan between the different departments. The sewer and the water fund are both enterprise funds that are separate from anything else.
Thank you.
No problem.
Appreciate that.
yeah, the components of the intertie were the piping and then our pump station for two pieces.
Right.
And the McMinnville piece was the piping. The other piece was the pumping station, which we loaned on, but both pieces together were basically the intertie project.
And we were lucky on that intertie project that we already had a line out to where the pump area was. So, and it was a feasible line, so we didn't have to redo that line. From, I don't know if you guys know where the pump station is, but if you go out 18, you go out Lafayette Highway and take a right, go towards Max. There's a building on the right hand side. That's our pump station. So we would have had to have put a line from there into where it connected with the Dayton line. So we made out pretty good there.
Plus we own the property.
Yes,
That was a huge.
exactly.
I mean, that worked out really well. So for me, just gonna state my opinion for this Adams Street Waterline Improvement Project, to get it back to there. I feel like it's more cost effective to spend the lower amount now than wait another fiscal year, get more bids, whatever, to do it, just to take in what we've already spent the money on to finish a project. We have a lot of projects in the CIP project list that have been started and not finished because we didn't have the funds to do that. And I would like to be fiscally responsible and not spend more money later. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Well, and these funds are coming out of the first portion that we received, not the portion that we just received, second portion this week.
Those are out, these are out of the first portion, I think, on the president.
Correct.
Yeah.
So one thing to think about, Sheila, and I'm not gonna make a big argument, but if we've got 20 loops to address, one of the arguments too was that a lot of contractors, it's too small of a job. If we had a better plan that somebody could come in, a full crew and get a bunch of it done, then I see potential cost savings in that if we can identify which ones are important and prioritize those.
I would agree, but with the fire station, and the water tie-in, I think that'd be too high of a.
I don't think,
I was saying,
I don't think
we would have. to
citywide will have the funds to do it in a large project like that.
Okay, well, and maybe it's, we say, hey, these top 5 are the most important. What's it gonna cost to do that? Not necessarily all 20, but just one at a time is gonna, there's a premium for every job that you get bidded, and if you combine a couple, you can save some.
I think that's a great idea.
I think it's a good idea to have that. I just don't think it's a good idea to hold this up to get that. I think we should continue on with this one. And then you're right, have Preston give us a list of all the ones, and maybe we can categorize them into sections of the city so that maybe these in this area need to be done first, and find out what those the costs on those are, so we can look to the future for them.
Add them to the CIP list.
Yeah.
So that they can be budgeted annually. So I move to award the Adams Street Water Project contract to Haworth Incorporated in the amount of $56,620 and authorize the city administrator to sign the necessary documents and administer the contract.
The only question that I have, do you know what their ETA is on this?
I think this was generally written to give them flexibility through the end of this building season. So I'd have to look to see what the contract says, but generally that's.
So you think it should be done between by the end of October or November?
Usually end of October is where we
Okay.
put in. This might have been extended. It's something that could be done over the winter, but we don't put it out there too far. So I'd have to look to see what that is, but there's always a date on which this needs to be completed within a few months.
Okay, sorry about that. Do I have a second? A second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 to 1. Okay, the next one is the IGA for the fire chief and firefighter. And I'm gonna ask Preston to go through the staff report again. I know this has been to us once or twice. So, but I think we need to go through the staff report again. If you can give us a staff report.
Thanks, Your Honor. I commend Kevin for putting this together here last week while I was out. And there's not a lot of new information on the staff report. But it is different, from prior. So let me just kind of go through 3 parts of this. I want to talk about why we're doing this IGA, address some of the questions that have come up, and then the ramifications of not approving it. So this IGA is the result of several years of working together with New Carlton Fire District, 22 years under the current chief. We've got our current IGA, which is in place with the New Carlton Fire District with hiring of our training officer. All of that has worked very well. Council set policy on this. We're following that policy. This IGA is an important bridge to whatever else the city decides to do on this in the future. Whether it's a district or whether it's more of a regional service delivery, like a North Yamhill Fire District, something like that, or it could be a contract situation with other providers. This IGA is a bridge to all of those things that could be determined by the city at a later date. So I want to remind you that in this IGA, there is a 6-month notice of termination required if the city wanted to back out of that. And it does not increase staff. So we take 3 part-time positions and create a fire chief that's shared among both. So 1 half-time position and then a full-time firefighter position, which is a combination of part-time positions in the city. So we're not increasing staff, but we are providing the very first full-time employee ever in the history of the Lafayette Fire Department. And I think I'm pretty safe to say that virtually everyone that voted for this fire station understands that someday we're going to staff it. Doesn't mean it's going to be 24/7 overnight. For the next 5 years, 10 years, it might be 20 years. But you got to start with 1 person, which this IGA does. The IGA allows us, these 2 agencies, to do better together than what each one of us can do separately. There's an important economy of scale to that. The services under this IGA are improved. They're enhanced to our community. I've talked about the specific time period where we have a gap in volunteers. That being during the day on weekdays. We have our least ability to respond during that time period. And to have a dedicated firefighter here during those times, service will be improved without a doubt. It's very important with more calls all the time that we staff where it's needed the most, and that this IGA does that. It does improve the services to this community. There's plenty of instances, many calls based on timing that we can't get to that we need to. Let me just give one example. Marie's partner was choking during a dinner. We got there within a few minutes and saved his life. If he had the unfortunate situation of choking a few hours earlier, we may not have got there. And that you can't put a price on. We are not a business in any respect. We are a public service organization, government. We provide essential public services. You can't put a price on getting to people within 5 minutes. We've got very low, very affordable, excellent fire insurance rates in the city. We have a new station. We have a qualified professional force. We're able to respond. And so all of our residents, business owners, and residents enjoy very good fire insurance rates because of that professionalism and those abilities. This IGA includes that situation. Some of the questions that have come up, there's questions about control. And if somebody has severe control issues, then this IGA is dead on arrival. But I remind Kelsey, this is very much like our law enforcement services contract with the sheriff's office. Our services are protected. They're supervised. They're directed by a sheriff who was elected because he knows what he's doing. Yes, we give up a little bit of control under an IGA, but the benefits far outweigh any concerns about control. The New Carlton Fire District board members are elected because they know what they're doing. We have a fire chief that supervises. Requirements by statute to be professionals. I am not qualified to direct law enforcement. I'm not qualified to direct fire emergency activities. Neither is anyone else on this council. This IGA is important to improve the services and protect those services for this community. There was concern about data. Data. We need more data. Well, you can't put a price on getting someone in an emergency within 5 minutes. Put a price on that. You can't. It's an emergency. It's an essential public service. You can't put a price on that. We saved a life. We've saved several lives. Could we have done that? We didn't have the staffing. Hard to put a price on that. I've had to call 911 a couple of times, and I'm amazed at how qualified they're there in a hurry. They set up my father, his vitals and everything, prepared him for transport until the ambulance arrived, and off he went. It was amazing. I've had 2 occasions to need to call for that, and our Lafayette Fire Department was there. You can't put a price on that. This IGA for fire and emergency services is much like the sheriff's. And I want you to think in those terms. So now, what are the risks of not approving this IGA? Well, they are grave. We risk losing our fire chief. We risk the New Carlton Fire District walking away and saying, withdrawing their IGA. We risk sending this community into crisis. I'm saying it will happen, but if the council does not approve this IGA, at this last hour, you could be sending this community into crisis. Please don't do that. If you want to change the fire service, fine, approve the IGA, figure out what you want to do, give the notice, form a district, do a contract, all those things are available.
Excuse me, are staff reports supposed to be so soapboxy?
Staff reports, just like your discussions, can be anything that they're needed to be.
I would like to be more objective on this instead of so dramatic.
Well, that's fine. I don't have a problem with what he's saying. Do you?
I think it's overly dramatic. I think he's exaggerating a lot of things. I think that because at last meeting, he suggested that we meet with the fire board, but now this is the last hour because no more discussion of that has happened. It's ridiculous.
No, it's
let's
not
get
ridiculous.
the facts. Let's get the facts. And we can discuss it.
Let's stop right here.
It's not ridiculous at all, because I'm not your errand boy to go talk to other elected officials about your willful ignorance.
No, but you
That's your
report to
job.
the city council.
Exactly, and I'm telling you what could happen, you know?
This yelling is not gonna work.
I think Preston has made his point.
I agree.
Okay.
That was all I was trying to get at. That can we get to some discussion if it's just going to be, you know,
Discuss.
I personally would like to hear from Terry and Tim before we discuss anything.
Terry, would you like to say what's going on?
I would like to say that on the spot. You know, we've worked at this for many years trying to get Lafayette in a good position and even get them a fire district. And here they are, and a perfect opportunity to be a part of a fire district and spread some of the costs out of fire protection, you know. And that's the whole point of this, is to kind of spread the fire costs out over a large area. So we have chiefs supervising one firefighter here, one firefighter there. We obviously pointed out that we're weak during the day. We're weak. And a lot of our calls are during the day. So we want to try and put one firefighter in there full time and plug that gap so that we have a response. And then we have a supervisor. And, you know, obviously if we have one supervisor supervising 2 people, then that's a good economies of scale or whatever, you know, as far as having one expensive person supervising 2 lower people. And then that way we can have more lower people and to do that job. And so that's why we kind of split it up like this. And, you know, it's the, you know, I was talking to one of our volunteers last night, and a young guy, and we struggle getting volunteers. I'm not kidding. It's struggling mightily, but everything's kind of the young guys can't find a place to live in this community. They can't afford to, they can't stay with their parents. People are moving out, moving on. We increased our numbers by taking people from the outside and have them come in and stay at the station. But, the trend, and we've lost our volunteers to other paid departments because they don't have volunteers. And they have lost their people to the Portlands and the Tuolumne Valleys of the area because they're losing their people. Certainly the pandemic hurt us, the economy hurt us, the homeless people, all those things that we see on television every day has hurt us, and people that struggle trying not to be homeless don't have time to volunteer, and people that, a lot of people are looking for employees and they can't find employees, and we can't find volunteers because they're out there, they're a commodity to fight over. We have volunteers that volunteer in other agencies too. So we've tried all that, but eventually we're going to have to hire our own people, cover our own staff, our own problems. That's just the fact. So we're trying to spread that cost over a larger area by having the supervisor paid for by somebody, more people, and then have that firefighter and have the firefighter. So that goes out and does the work, and that we're just trying to be responsive and effective, cost effective, and trying to get more people out there to take care of the people, essentially. And that's where our weakness is. We'll start there with daytime response, and eventually, someday we'll have daytime 24. It could be regionalized service. We'll have volunteers for a long time in the future, but eventually our goal is to provide the best coverage and at the cost-effective way. And this is kind of a first step. Lafayette is what, 1 square mile, 5,000 people, a pretty large population, but a lot of it leaves during the day. A lot of it's older. There's lots of young people. It's expensive to live here. So we're struggling, with getting young people in the door. They can't live at home forever. We seem to get a lot of kids and then they move on, stuff like that. So, or just a lot of things are pulling at us. So we need to do something. And it was kind of a bold step, because most of the other, where you watch McMinnville, they're trying to form a fire district right now to help subsidize their fire department. Dundee is going to be doing the same thing. Amity and Dayton are talking. Everybody's talking to try and stretch out the dollars they have and provide better service. And they're all struggling for personnel, whether it's paid, volunteer, whatever. They're struggling. Everybody's struggling. And so we can't rely on volunteers because it's just not there, and we don't have the time. And there's other issues, and you might get hurt doing this job, so it's working against us. So it's been a real struggle, unfortunately, but that's where we are today. So this, I feel, is the best step for the city of Lafayette.
So my only concern, there's a lot of great attributes to doing this, but
Yeah.
my only concern is, as Preston said, I don't feel like it's a control thing, but maybe having somebody from Lafayette that is qualified represent Lafayette, because we don't have any position offering on the board that they're creating. That's my concern. Is
Yeah,
where's the representing Lafayette?
Just to
Yeah.
clarify, they're not creating a board. It's the Carlton Fire Board. It already exists.
Right, but
It's not a new
adding,
board that would be formed for
right, but
this.
adding Lafayette, but we wouldn't
I
have.
don't know if their structure would allow for.
Well, that's my question. is
I don't know.
where's
I
the
don't think-
representation of a
Yeah,
qualified
it's all in the
person
idea.
from our city?
The thing is, you're representative of someone, he's gonna be here half the time. You just walk over and talk to him because he's there. He is the representative, and the way it works, with our fire board is they just set policy. He runs the operation over there. So he's essentially in charge, and he's here half the time. All you gotta do is walk over and talk to him. And he runs the operation. Policy is set by the board. The finances are set by the board, but your chief and all that, the finance, all we're talking about is the operations. So it's really, he's here, you just come and talk to him. Yes.
I had a question. I think it was 2020, it could have been the year before. Bad fire season, and Carlton decided to ban fireworks citywide. Was that?
I don't know.
Well, they did. It was big.
Well,
Was that a fire board decision?
no. No, I think that's more of a police, city, not willful, but pie in the sky type thinking, you can't find fireworks. There's no way. We don't have enough people.
There were a lot of municipalities that year that did ban fireworks.
They tried, but they didn't.
Well, no, I'm sure some people did.
Yeah.
So that was not in any way a fire board decision?
No.
So did that come from the city council? Where did it, because it happened in Carlton.
Well, fireworks is, our job is, putting out fires. Fireworks is not our.
It increases fire risk.
It does, but we're more of a reactive operation than proactive. We're trying to be a little proactive here tonight, but most of the time we're reactive,
So could the fire board make that kind of policy
No,
at all?
no.
Are you talking about making that
They
policy
couldn't
for
make it
Lafayette?
Lafayette.
Well, but if it's,
That'd have to be a council, political, you're a political entity, you would have to do that. I would advise against it.
The Carlton board will not have that big of a reach into Lafayette.
No.
well, if they were setting policy, if they set policy for what the fire chief was enforcing. Again, I don't know how that.
But they can't require the fire chief to enforce laws that are not laws here. If our city council doesn't say there's a ban on fireworks, the board can't say, look, chief, we know Lafayette's technically not banning fireworks, but since we are, you've got to enforce it in Lafayette. They can't do that.
They can't do that.
Yeah. Anyway.
They're not, the board is.
I'm sorry.
Hold on a minute.
Have a question for you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I actually have something with the council.
Okay.
No,
Yeah, hold on a minute.
yeah.
We will finish this and we'll get back to you. They don't have any control over policies for Lafayette. The only control that the board has is the operation of the fire district, or the fire department. Now, if we don't like, or we have a complaint on a problem, it would be just like the sheriff's department. The administrator would go to the fire chief, and the fire chief and find out what the complaints were and what needed to be done. And then he would take it to the board, or we would take it to the board, either way. And it says here in this thing, it says the district may consult with the city on any management practices or processes.
On what page? Sorry.
That's page 27.
And the fire department is, all fire departments have many masters. We have very few, like we're most agencies, we have many masters, and so we have very little. The fire code kind of controls how things go. There's a state fire marshal's office, there's DPSSD, Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. There's OSHA is out there. I mean, we have a lot of people telling us how to run things, and the standard of care is still the same, for Portland and for us, for Bentonville or anything like that. So we have, we have our insurance company telling us what to do too. So we have lots of bosses that keep us on the straight and narrow, how to put fires out, stuff like that.
You know what I think might be an issue here is that having Carlton be the lead on this IGA, maybe the council or some people in the city will think that Carlton will always be first and we'll be second.
Well,
And Tim can tell us that right there. He can answer that question because he's going to have to be the fire chief. So is he going to treat both cities equally?
Of course, I mean, half it still will be employed here, through the IGA, so Lafayette gets just as much attention as Carlton would or vice versa. So it's still the same, like everything will remain the same. Everybody gets the same amount of attention, the same amount of time. I split my time between here and Carlton, and
And each will have their own full-time firefighters.
Right, so, yeah.
I guess, Harry, I'm confused why for years we've tried to come to an agreement and have been unsuccessful. What's different now as opposed to say 3 years ago?
I'm leaving. That's part of it, and so now that's, and again, we talked about how I got here and how we got here, I was a part-time chief and then got hired by Lafayette, and then Carlton came along and we couldn't come to an agreement. So we just Lafayette had a lot of problems, we've had problems with stuff, sewer systems, sewer tanks, we were fighting that, the town was growing, people were, there were a lot of other things that had to fall in place, and now the fire station is built, kind of a priority that I'm relieving. And so that's why we wanted to kind of tie it together. And it's kind of been somewhat awkward, sometimes, but, having two masters and, that both agencies have been great. They never question me, why are you here? Why aren't you there? They just, they know I'm doing the best I can, so I'm sure Tim will do the same thing. So but right now we're just having a change into the guard. And it's important to have kind of, I've always had the security of a job or retirement or Social Security. Got my first check the other day, but, and Tim doesn't. My kids were already grown, and his are younger, and he wants that job security. I have one boss. We went through that when we hired him as a training officer. One boss, one people to worry about. He's responsible for both, but he's only got one person, instead of being just two base hospital. So that's why we decided, at this time to tear up the one for the training officer and just have one for the chief. It's actually the management of the fire department here.
The one other component that's different is the financial strength of the New Carlton Fire District. They had debt that they worked off, and so they're in a position now to hire. If they were in a better financial position a year ago, we probably would have seen this a year ago. So this is they're ready to move on and to hire people. And so and that's in addition to all the things that Terry mentioned.
Yeah, and we're mostly rural, and we're doing real well financially, and we have no track record with PERS, so our PERS is a little less expensive for us than the city, and so it's just kind of a natural occurrence the way it worked out. And rural districts have one focus, and that's fire. That's all they learn now, fire and EMS. So they're narrowly focused where the city has many water, sewer, streets, and stuff like that. So
The only issue that I see with the contract is provision 11 on page 5. I believe that the second paragraph under that header should read that this agreement may be terminated at any time for any reason. Just because I don't feel like anywhere in here it says a reason or reasons for terminating, and I could just see that becoming an issue for both cities if something were to come up to cause that.
we had two attorneys look at it. I'm not an attorney. I wouldn't know,
What does our other one say? Does our other one have that provision? The one for the, we have an idea right now for our training officer. Does that have the same provision?
I can grab that and look for you.
So I have a question for Tim. Thank you so much tonight. If this goes through and, you're managing both fire departments, if the city council or city administration has an issue with, hey, we'd like to see, something done on the Lafayette side a little bit differently, or we'd like to see this incorporated. Is this just we can ask, but it may or may not happen, or what, short of ripping up this agreement and saying we're going to walk away if this doesn't happen, what's the proper channel for that to go through so that the council still has some say in the issues that Lafayette's seeing are being addressed?
Well, do the same as basically what you do now. You're gonna go to Preston or, whatever your issues are, go to Preston, Preston will come to me and we'll make those changes how it's, or, how we can or where we can. Like Terry was saying, there's a lot of things that we are, DPSST, we have all these other entities that we have to follow. And as long as we're within their boundaries, then yes, we can make changes. But if we're not within those boundaries, then that's where it becomes a little bit different. But it's the same things, like I said, just now you go to Preston and Preston goes to Chief makes those changes as it should be.
Okay, my concern is Preston said he doesn't feel he's qualified to represent, he doesn't want to control that. Hopefully our new administrator would be comfortable fielding that communication.
No, that's not what he said.
You did, but
No, he didn't say
No,
that.
no. I am not qualified under statute to direct law enforcement activities, same for fire and emergency services. That doesn't mean that I can't work with them just like I do with the sheriff's office. That's an important role for the city administrator. Make sure all the contracts go smooth. You follow council's directives, you make improvements. It's a constant, continuous improvement thing. And the city administrator is involved in both fire and law enforcement.
so I have another question. If you did say that no one on the council is qualified to direct fire matters. So we're giving that to the New Carlton Fire Board, Fire District. Why doesn't Lafayette make their own fire board of elected officials? If we're hearing all this, we're growing, we're gonna need more staffing. I don't believe the fire board is paid. They're elected. Are they paid to serve?
No, they're volunteers.
So why don't we make our own fire board that then two fire boards can come together and work this out?
That's a good question, but
It takes time.
generally speaking, fire boards cover a larger area. And the city is the fire department right now, so that's a department of the city. And there is a separate entity with its own task base. So if you created a fire district in here, you'd have to create a new tax base for them to operate on to form a district.
So in order to put a board in, you have to have a district?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the way I understand it. And
That
there's only two forms of fire department.
that leads me into something that I wanted to say is that when I look at this agreement, what it does to me is it gives Lafayette a 5-year breathing room space. Meaning in the next 5 years, we could decide with the citizens' help and the council's help, what they want their fire department to look like. Whether we want to go into a district, whether we want to, add to, join another district. Maybe we want to go into McMinnville, something of that, but this gives us some breathing room so that we can have that time to figure out what we want to do. Because depending on what we need to do, it could be expensive.
And
Well,
that's,
again, 5 years is a significant time period.
Mhm.
So the fact that we can terminate this if
Anytime.
necessary, I mean, hopefully that wouldn't happen, but there is some recourse. The city's not stuck in this.
I hope it all works out.
And I think it will, but
Everybody's.
I also understand there are things
You
that
know,
happen.
But if you look around, this is what everybody's doing. It's getting I know it's got to be a good reason. I mean, Newburgh did it a couple of years ago. And, they joined the fire district. They gave away their fire department, let Tuolumne Valley, I keep running for them and like that. And if you look down the road, we gotta do something like this in order to keep the cost affordable and for the citizens. We struggle mightily just getting staffing, we're gonna have to buy our own, and that gets expensive, very quickly as I found out, when we were hiring Tim, it's very expensive. So in order to, and you don't need them all. Well, maybe this weekend I need everybody, but this is very unusual. In case you haven't heard, there's a
The
big
wind.
windstorm.
Yes.
Everybody's gearing up. The PG&E shutting off your power.
But
Not
give you
ours,
4
not
hours
ours.
notice.
Yeah, they're not shutting it off in Lafayette. That's in foothills up to canyons, don't worry. So, but things are getting more complicated and you need a larger organization. And we can't, as a county, we can't afford to have 10 fire departments in a county. We need, more boots on the ground, less management, everybody trying to do the same thing, and we're falling all over each other. And it's where we should have people out there handling people's problems instead of a bunch of fire chiefs.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
So on the term 11, talking about the renewal, because Marie, I understand it gives us 5 years, but it says it automatically renews on the 5th year. So how is that different than saying this agreement is good for 10 years?
Because we can give the 6 months notice.
We can do that anytime though.
Yeah, but
But if we just-
we know that it's gonna automatically renew. If we don't want it to renew, we just give that 180 days notice.
We
That's
just
what
stop
the
at that
provision
4th
allows.
year.
yeah, essentially.
So I mean, we're automatically opted in. I
So they
would,
wanted that because in the case that we wanted to terminate, everybody wants enough time to hire
Mhm.
to replace those positions.
These
We
are
went over
almost
that.
the exact same terms we did with the training, with the IGA we have right now that this council approved.
okay,
With the training officer, this agreement shall continue in perpetuity until either party terminates the agreement by giving the other party at least 6 months, 180 days written notice. This one auto renews at 5 years. It can be terminated with 180 days or 6 months. Notice.
Yeah. so if we
It's,
don't want to
the
renew-
verbiage is different, but it's the same agreement.
so we have to give the same notice whether we're opting out after year 1 or at year 5.
It's 180 days, no
Yeah.
matter what.
And it was the purpose, we went over this, I remember, because I was the one arguing on it, was the fact that without that, there's not protection for either city with losing employees for
Right.
staffing.
A fire chief of all things, you don't want to lose. a
Yeah, and the
chief that don't know
fire
it.
chief is the highest paid employee. And, it's only fair to give each other 6 months' time to review your budgets, to figure out where you
Well,
want to
and
go.
frankly, if people keep continuing to not want to work, I mean, there's gonna be staff shortages, so 6 months makes more sense.
Angela, did you have something you wanted to say? Yes, please.
Okay,
Moving target.
Angela 528, do I have to move it back?
No, you're fine.
Okay, Angela 287 Canyon Drive. So I wasn't gonna talk tonight, but listening to you talk brought up a lot of memories. For more than 10 years, I had been asking for us to be able to form a fire district with Carlton because their citizens thought so far ahead that they invested in their community. And I've heard pushback from citizens in Carlton who want to know why we're going to get the benefit from all of the hard work that they did. And that's a fair statement. So when we start talking about who's in control of what, that's why, because they've invested heavily into this. The fire district situation throughout our region, throughout Oregon, we're seeing more and more combinations. The problem that I have with the back and forth on this is we would not be having this conversation if we were talking about police services. We support the sheriff's office unquestionably. And while they have a vast volunteer unit, we would not expect any of their volunteers to hit the road to go and take care of the bad ones. We put the cadets with officers. But we do expect them from the fire department. We expect older fire people to go into dangerous situations when really they should be looking towards administrative work. And I really struggle that we keep fire as this volunteer mentality when these people are working just as hard as their deputies. And we don't question that. We pay the sheriff's department. We make sure there's a deputy here all the time. We make sure that they have the resources they need. And I think we need to start using that mindset when we talk about the fire structure in our town. And it's going to start combining. They have a board that controls things because they have that tax bill. And that may be something we look at. In a 6-month cancellation policy, I think is pretty good, because if we start working towards this, if we start working towards having a combined district or our own district, whatever it is, we're gonna know 6 months ahead of time. We're gonna know 5 years ahead of time, but we've got to start taking the fire services seriously. We are a small square area town, And we have managed to pack so many people into it. It creates a fire hazard, it creates more health hazards, it creates a response team that we need to fund. And honestly, we get a deal on the sheriff's department, I think we should be investing more into our fire situations. That's just me.
Thank you for your information, your statement, appreciate it. And that's one of the points of this is that we need to start looking towards, bettering our fire services. And this gives us the ability to do it in the next 5 years.
Well, we don't have the ability to do our own right now. And I apologize because at the last council meeting, I opened my big mouth and said, we need to have a fire chief and a full-time employee here in case a child choked. Sorry about your partner. I feel horrible now that I said that, but like, that's like the reality of the situation. I just thought as a mother, I was in that situation in McMinnville and thankfully they were able to get there like that. But I don't know if they could do that here. Like I've had the experience of where a child had a seizure with me here and it took 15 minutes because McMinnville responded. They got there before Lafayette even showed up and we have all these new houses coming in. And so the fact that they went down from a year to 6 months shows to me that they have good intentions. And they're acting reasonable, in my opinion.
If we have one full-time firefighter here stationed here and a call comes in, child choking, are they able to go on that call all by themselves?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
R1.
Which is why I was so adamant last time, like this, we owe an obligation to the city and kind of what Angela Flood said, we support the deputies and we support them protecting this community and serving this community. The fire station costs a lot of money. Like, why aren't we utilizing it? Why aren't we providing these services to our citizens? But I do agree that I think we should be looking long-term like Carlton did to eventually be able to either go out on our own or, we just have to see what the future does, but.
When we built the fire department, there was a lot of discussion about how long-term we should look out. And a lot of the counselors and stuff, not a lot, I would say some of the counselors didn't want to put in some of those overnight sections where they sleep and stuff like that. They wanted us to cut the price, and we didn't, knowing that somewhere down the line in the next 10 or 15 years, that fire station is going to have to be.
Well, as much as Carlton and Lafayette's growing, that's probably not unrealistic in 2 or 3 years.
We have people staying there now.
Yeah.
We have firefighters that will stay the night there.
And so for me, I'm gonna be annoyed if this doesn't pass and we go another month and God forbid there's a tragedy that could have been avoided.
Exactly.
Well, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, let's do it.
I move to approve the IGA with NCFD and authorize the mayor to execute the agreement.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank
Okay, no one there. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the discussion. Appreciate the input from the gallery.
I just got, can we do the fire report right now?
Yes. Yes.
You don't want to say for the meeting.
Absolutely. You don't want to say all that stuff.
I just wanted to talk about this weekend, a little bit, we're staffing more than we're staffing the same we do. We have volunteers on there, other people staffing up. The blackout doesn't really affect us. We have nobody out on conflagration right now, but we've been very active in that. Governor, they call a lot. So we have some people, other people, our old volunteers are up in Joseph right now, and they've been gone. They're going to College Falls, and there's activity going on right now in the fire service. I just want to let you know that they're out there taking care of it.
Chief, I just have one request on the reports that you guys provide.
Just a second. Wait. Sorry.
On the reports that you guys provide monthly,
Yeah.
I would like to see like a time that they came in, daytime, nighttime. I just want to see like a time stamp or something.
We'll see, we'll run just a time of day.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'm just interested in looking.
I think that's important if we're heading into hiring somebody. I think that time of day and the day of the week is important.
Yeah,
Right now we're staffing 10 to 6. I mean, 9 to 6. And the new guy, when we get him on board, it'd be 9 to 6, Monday through Friday. So we want to see when we're gonna have to hire somebody for that.
Well, now the full-time guy will be here until January, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
First of January. So we'll start looking. All right. My name,
Thank you. Can I ask you a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Do I have to
Quickly.
identify myself?
Yes.
Michael Shaw, 1127 Bridgewood. Do you have a number of how many firefighters you need for a certain population?
we'll take as many as we can get. Because they're all coming and going at different times. So you figure that's a tough question because I don't think anybody's got a really good evidence. You have to try to have 3 volunteers for every paid staff, and you probably have, ideally I'd like to have 24-hour coverage, but as far as paid staff.
Well, currently we've got a population of what, about 4,400?
4,500.
Yeah, we had 25.
So
volunteers.
how many firefighters would there need to be to service a population that size?
That's where we get into this deep hole, dark hole. Ideally, my thought is that we have 24/7 coverage with 3 people here, but that makes no sense for 4,000 people. That's too many, but ideally, that's what you'd like to have so that when we have a fire in the community, they go right away, but you couldn't afford it on 4,000. But if you had a larger district and it covered from 99 to Lafayette Highway to the edge of McMinnville, and you had 4 people here, then you could justify that and afford it. And I think that
one of the questions that I think it's one of my hot buttons. Out of the number of calls,
yes,
what's the breakout between medical emergency versus fire?
that's nationwide. Around here, it's about 70-75% of our calls are medical, and the other are fire, motor vehicle accidents, cats in trees, or something like that.
Considering that, I would propose somebody looking into what would it take to fund a full-time EMT?
Well, that's
I think that would be
But they-
far better money spent.
They are. They are.
That's what the
this is.
firefighter is. It is a
That's what our
problem.
firefighter is.
Yeah, it just passed.
Okay, we're gonna do it. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
I have one question, and it's kind of for later too. We had talked a while back about looking at better incentives perhaps for volunteers. Maybe it was around budget time. I think if the city's struggling to find volunteers because of what we're doing, we need to change what we're doing.
I think we did. We changed some of the things that we pay the guys. Didn't we double them and stuff?
Yeah, we changed some of that.
We changed some of that already.
We passed it.
Madam President.
Yes,
Sure.
I'm sorry.
I'm Marilyn Duval, 1133 Bridge Loop, and I am on the budget committee. And yes, we did double the cost or the amount that we are going to pay the volunteers now.
Correct.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been talking. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
We continue to pay them $5 a call. And it's been that way for 20 years.
It never got passed on.
I might have missed that. I might have.
So you get good news to pass along to your volunteers, right?
It's been doubled a lot.
We're trying, it's curious that you bring that. We're trying, we got a grant from the state to hire firefighters during the summer. We have 2 right now. Well, actually, we have 1. We got a grant for 1. And he's quitting at the end of the month to go. He got a full-time job with an ambulance. And so we put up a calendar for people to get paid to come down. And it's mostly empty. We're paying 3 times what they normally, just to come down, sit there, and we'll have them roll hose and do stuff, keep the place clean and stuff like that. But it's we're paying $16 an hour and we can't get anybody. Because they have jobs, they have places to go. people, the younger people are in transition. So it's, you talk about incentives, I think personally, my personal opinion, I haven't been in this a long time, is the state's got to do something about it, step it up with the legislature, give some kind of tax break or something to volunteer first responders. They struggle mightily. A lot of them would like to go on conflagration, see the big, just to see what it's like and be out there on a big fire and be part of that big program, helping a large area and stuff like that. And they can't get off work. Or, they just can't, and so people see the value of it, but then they don't see the value of it. So until we, I'd say the city council needs to give volunteer firefighters $25 off their water bill or something like that. It's something that would help everybody or something, include that people. Yeah, I know, but I mean, something that, something more like that. The money is nice, but it's not the end all.
But Terry, didn't you did extend the stipend for weekend on call?
Yeah, we have weekend.
That's something new that's been implemented.
Yeah, we struggled to fill that too. It's people want to, they don't want it. I don't know.
Has that been increased at all? And since January, technically since July 1st, has the pay for weekends, picking up weekends, so to speak, has that increased? We're just trying to figure out if the changes that the city council intended have happened. So have there been any changes in the reimbursement that they get for picking up weekend shifts, calls? Because that was happening before. They were getting paid for picking up entire weekends.
Yeah, they do get paid.
Yeah, but that hasn't gone up at all
That
this
hasn't
year.
changed.
Okay,
We need
we need to follow up on
Yeah.
this, because that's
Person, we need to follow
that's
up,
not what was intended at all.
That
That was all
was,
supposed to go up, and maybe it wasn't communicated. I don't know.
that was a big discussion at the budget committee too, so, Preston, we need to make sure that Terry's aware of what they should be paying, what we did. Can you?
We can do that back retroactively too, right? I mean, the council decided it.
We have the capacity.
Support that.
I don't know if I have the capacity, but we have it.
I bet Tim.
I support going retroactive too.
Yeah, it was supposed to happen, so
It's supposed to have
Should
been
have been
July
July
1st.
first, that's
Yeah.
when the new budget that was passed supported all of that.
They don't even cash their checks. You know that.
hand it to them in cash.
Some of them are pretty small, but it's amazing. I have a hard time balancing because there's so many that don't cash their check.
Maybe we need to set up automatic deposit.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, but,
Deposited away.
yeah, but when you give a volunteer a check, it's
We'll work on that.
nice to have something in their hand.
Yeah, but if they're not benefiting from it, they'll at least benefit it if it's done in their bank.
It'll
Oh, yeah,
hit
it's
their
double,
account.
yeah, but still.
We're so nice to them. We
Yeah.
buy them sweatshirts and t-shirts and.
Well, I think that we need to go back to July 1st and find out to make sure that the new stuff that we passed during the budget probably has been put into effect.
And rumor on the street is they'd like more t-shirts, just FYI.
We have plenty of t-shirts.
Just passing the rumor on.
Does some people wear those t-shirts like they have no other t-shirt?
Maybe.
Good,
No,
give them more.
give them more. If they need more shirts to wear, my gosh, give them more shirts.
One time, I try and control those, because one time we had a big t-shirt giveaway, and then 3 weeks later, I found it on one of our customers.
Oh,
And not
yeah.
not in the best of circumstances. So sometimes you have no,
Well, don't give them to the public.
they
The
they
volunteers
end up in the
like
public,
t-shirts.
they probably garage sales or something, I don't know, but, it's just.
Well, I think the t-shirt thing can be taken care of.
We're going with pink for the next month.
Oh, good.
Anything else, Terry, in your report?
It's just,
Preference awareness
be
month.
careful this.
Yeah.
That's anything crazy. All right.
Thank you both for coming. We
All
appreciate
right.
it.
We're gonna
Yeah.
got another drill.
Yeah, enjoy.
Hey,
Okay, now that we're on to the next one, it's the indexing for the water Transportation Parks SDC, and Preston, you want to explain, go over the staff report on this?
Yeah, Your Honor, when council updated those SDCs, water, parks and streets over the years, we included the ability to come back to council annually and have those increased based on inflation. And so the staff report identifies the inflation factors that we look at, engineers construction index. So that's been applied 5.6% to each of those three SDCs. So in total, our four SDCs for a home would go up from 20,281 to $21,208. It's an overall increase of 4.6%.
Now explain to us why the sewer is zero.
Well, the sewer has not been updated, but that work is in progress to have that updated. And it would include an annual ability to annually increase those like the rest. Right now, you don't have that ability.
So we have somebody working on that.
Correct. Our same consultant, Kern Cloud, is working on updating our CIP as well as updating the SDC methodology to include the annual indexing. Yes.
Okay, any discussion?
When it says effective October 1st, is that for applications submitted after or on or October 1st?
Correct. Starting October 1st, new applications would be assigned the new fees.
So the SDCs are payable when the application comes back as approved, correct?
When they come to pick up their building permit.
Right.
So, right.
Right, so I mean, you submit the permits, the application up to 6 weeks.
Mhm.
And then you pay. My concern, I just want to make sure that if it's October 1st, that if somebody's in the process or turns something in this week, they get their permits back October 2nd, and you say, oh, by the way, you owe 900, and that's not how that works.
No,
So any permit applications turned in October 1st or later.
correct.
It
It's
would
when
apply
we
to-
receive the applications. That's what October 1st.
Okay. How many permits is the city on track for the rest of this year once October hits?
Well, it's hard to say. We've been processing them over the summer. Averaging 8-10 a week. That's, I think, probably gonna slow down. But it may not. You know, so it's we still got probably a good number of permits still yet this building season.
My concern is with not inflation, interest rates causing a slowdown in purchasing. This is gonna be, it's another small increase. I mean, $1,000 in the scheme of a $400,000 or $500,000 house that is being built is relatively small, but I don't know that now is the right time to do that with the slowdown happening. I know the city has to stay current, but our rates historically have still been high compared to some of the other cities, so.
I worry about getting into this cycle like we did with the water, where the water rate increases were paused for a couple of years for various reasons, economic downturn, COVID, financial hardships, all understandable reasons. But because of that, it's going to put us in a position that we're going to have a large jump in water rates, predictably, because eventually we have to catch up all at once. I'm concerned about not doing smaller incremental increases and holding off because it's not a good time, or economically it's not the best time. I understand that. It definitely makes sense. I just worry about getting, again, back to the same situation that we're about to be in with the water rates.
Well, it's just gonna hit all of the citizens.
Preston, when there was a long time before we reviewed the SDCs and they weren't changed. When was that? We haven't changed the SDCs every year, you know, for the last 20 years. There was a time where we didn't change anything at all, and then we did studies, and then we brought them up to 10. How many years in between that study and was there that we didn't increase them? Do you remember?
I don't, I know that over the last half a dozen years, we've updated Water Street and Parks.
Right, I understand.
But, you know, there's some gaps in between each one of those. And this is applied to differently than our utility rates. You know, every resident business pays a water bill. That's completely separate from this. These are people who are building new homes, building structures.
She understands that what she was talking about was the pause in the 3 years. Now we're behind in water, and she was using that as an example.
Mhm.
Why not increase these yearly? Hold on a second, Angela,
We were ready to go up there.
whether you go to the podium, yes.
So SDCs are not, I mean, we charge the builder, but they tack that on to the price of a home. And right now, we are so getting people so priced out, adding something like this on. And the limitations of using the SDCs have to be matched with other funds. So they're going into this fund that may or may not sit there. To the question of how often are the pause of how long they haven't been used, is there a way that we could pause this topic right now? You guys, not we, but that you could pause this topic right now and get a history of the last 20, somebody said 20 years, of when it had been reviewed and the percentages they were done. Because there may be historical precedents for pausing it in a situation like we're in right now. Because we are in a recession. It was great when the building boom was going on, but right now we're pricing people out of being able to live somewhere. Anyway, that's just.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't see the fact that stopping it and not increasing it would harm anything. I mean, our rates are what they are. And they go to creating good streets, good parks, and everything that everybody uses, services that everybody uses. Somebody's got to pay for those services. And 5.6 is not even close to what was the inflation rate this year?
Well, I don't think that we increased these for 2 or 3 years now.
It was last year, I believe, that it was
Last year?
increased.
September
Right,
9th, according to this, 2021.
So
Well, there was a pause. I remember there being a pause on it.
The years previous before that, before we did at least what I remember, is before we did the studies to tell us where we should be, there was a long time where we didn't do anything with the SDC.
And I want to say last year's parks was a huge amount. So it's not, again, you can't compare it exactly with utility because we try to keep the utility rates low.
Right,
And
right. I'm just.
they were brought pretty
comparatively,
current.
We're trying to keep up with inflation
No, I
on the
get
cost
that.
of our maintenance. Inflation's going up.
Right.
Those funds have to come somewhere. So if SDCs are incrementally increased rather than, pausing for a few years and a few chunks. So what happens if, we pause for like 5 years? You know what, let's just calm down on the SDCs for 5 years, get through this recession, however long it takes. And 2027 rolls around. Like, ooh, this is not actually covering our needs. These SDCs aren't.
Oh, yeah, because
this is
every
not
year the
enough.
cost to maintain and
It goes up.
improve.
Right, so, but hold on, I'm not done. So then you've got people who are like, I am ready to build in Lafayette. Yep, this is what their SDCs are. They are $20,000. Like, all right, I'm getting all the plans, getting everything ready, purchase the land. I'm gonna go put in my permit. Then they happen to, it happens to be a few months in between that time, they go to pull in their permit and they're like, ooh. And I thought it was 20,000, but just this month, it went up to 35,000. What?
So
These are where versus if somebody says, ooh, initially I thought it was 20,000, looks like it's now 2,100. That's a little bit more, but certainly not detrimental to me building this house now.
I
So-
just-
So
I-
we're able to revisit every year though. So I understand if you're saying, okay, a recession's still going on, recession's still going on. But we would also have more data of a year from now. What does that look like? Can we bring that up a little bit? That these crazy inflation numbers are not gonna continue if there is a recession that lasts very long. But we've had developers want to come in and build apartments or multi-unit housing, and they say, look, your rates are way higher compared to other cities, even closer to Portland, that you would assume would be higher. And
I haven't
sometimes
heard that.
they compared it in what we looked at. They said, this city is this much. We looked at it in a closed session. I can't share the documents, but I can talk about the fact that that was the case where they said this city was only $9,000 a door or whatever. So they're already saying Lafayette's high. There's a shortage of rentals that, now, again, I'm splitting this between houses, but a lot of other places, they have different tiers of SDCs to say a single family home, multifamily home, apartments, whatever, they pay different percentages. And if we're going to continue just increasing it, at some point we need to start splitting that out and saying, all right, the effect that a single family home has versus some apartments is going to be different for different things. And
Sorry, not to interrupt, but
and, to be more competitive so that developers do want to come in and provide possibly more rental, affordable rentals that people are looking for.
Do you really think that a $900 difference in the SDCs is going to create a less, marketable difference in the market value of that house?
It's gonna increase the cost. So the contractors, they have a certain amount of cost for their house. They have to make a certain amount. So they're not gonna continue.
So are we saying-
Hold on.
Well,
Can I talk, please? They're not going to continue to build new homes if the ones they have built can't sell, but they're gonna say, hey, I've got these 3 homes available. My bottom dollar is this. And that sets the price for comparable homes in the area. So it doesn't raise it by a ton for the area, but it incrementally raises it.
so are we setting the SDCs to be good to the developer? Or are we setting the SDCs to be good to the citizens and the services that the citizens need? Which one are we doing
The
there?
developer passes every cost on to the people that are gonna live here.
Right,
So
that's the point.
it's transparent to the developer.
Mhm.
It may be a barrier for smaller developers, but that's not what's going on here. My question is, is $900 gonna make a big difference? If it's gonna fix Bridge Street, okay, sign me up. You talk about good roads and good sidewalks.
we did discuss, when we talked about changing up and updating the laws for the ADUs, we did discuss changing the SDCs for an ADU dwelling. And that was a large discussion that we had, including Jim Jacks. And so we tabled that discussion for a later date when we had more data and more information. So that is something that we have.
Right, and there's more tiers that you can, dig into a multifamily versus.
Right. So it's important to know that when you're making these decisions for people that are building big houses or regular sized houses, they also do apply to the ADUs currently in our city.
Mhm.
Everything considered a unit.
Correct, yes.
And it's costing us more than 5.6% to take care of the streets, to take care of the parks and everything else like that. I don't think 5.6 is too much.
I'd like to
And-
see us wait a year, not 5 years, a year to see where that puts us. That's my preference. I understand the need to stay current. I think we're a little high comparatively to some other areas. We're not the highest, but we're high enough that we should be able to figure out how to use our money wisely to do what we need to. If money was no issue, we could increase it by 100% and okay, let's fix it. But that's not realistic either, so.
Part of that is we also have some of the lowest city taxes. So our revenue that comes in isn't as high to help buffer some of these costs.
You know,
Some of the lower city lowest city taxes in the county.
Our tax rate is probably one of the lowest in the county.
I mean, we could raise that and then keep these costs low, but the money has to.
I don't think we
come
can
from
raise our
somewhere.
tax rate.
Right, exactly, that would have to go to the voters. So that would have to go to the voters, but the money has to come from somewhere, whether it's city taxes or whether it's from SDCs, it has to come from somewhere to take care of these things. Right now, as you pointed out, we can't even fully really maintain all the things. Bridge Street's falling apart. Nobody here will disagree with that. Not doing increases isn't gonna help with that. Those monies aren't coming from it. There's no other source of funds for those.
And I've seen no effort of fixing, not patching, but fixing Bridge Street.
It's not like this money's just sitting there unused though. If what's here is not even enough to maintain our streets, it's definitely not enough to completely fix Bridge Street.
You know, the last time we talked about Bridge Street, about rebuild, because Bridge Street is gonna be needed a complete rebuild and sidewalks and stuff like that, and we're talking about, I believe that we discussed it, it was like $3 to $5 million to do that.
That's an old number.
And that's an old number. So, you know, that is Bridge Street. We're gonna have to do some creative thinking to get Bridge Street down.
The thing for me is people are gonna keep moving here. They're all going to be utilizing the streets, the water, the sewer, the parks, the kids, whatnot. If we're not keeping up kind of with inflation, this is going to fall on the citizens more so because things come up. We need to do things where some of these funds could be helping with improving these road projects. And so without that, this is really just falling back on the citizens. And I don't think that's fair or right. $900, in my opinion, is not going to make or break somebody moving here. Go choose a cheaper oven or fridge. You know, like that's just the reality. Unfortunately, I don't disagree. I acknowledge we're in a recession. Everything's a mess, but this is just going to fall on the city, the citizens of the city.
So let me just throw out one thing. Grove does help pay for its fair share if you keep up on the SDCs. The city will not keep growing the way it is now because we are restricted on where we can grow. You drive around town, there's very few lots left in the city. So the growth, the big growth is going to be with the new subdivision, Meadowbrook, getting built out. Once that's built out, there's nowhere else to grow until the urban growth boundary gets expanded. The limitation there is our wastewater treatment plant. We only have a capacity of 5,500 population. So we could continue to grow until we get to 5,500. And then we have to have a new treatment plant or expanded. So what this does in indexing is it helps capture the new development to pay its fair share as Meadowbrook gets built out. You can't go retro and collect this in the future. So we are limited in who we can charge because we're running out of buildable options.
With the full Meadowbrook build out, what's the expected population gonna be? Is it gonna be close to the 55?
No. No, we're going to be around 500 population short, so about 5,000. Meadowbrook gets us to about 5,000.
So if we build out, this is switching topics just a little bit. If we build out that industrial as expected for the urban renewal district, as our urban renewal plan is based on, the success is based on that, then we're gonna go over our capacity, which wasn't brought up a single time. I mean, we're gonna have to have a new wastewater treatment plant in order to make our urban renewal district work.
I don't think it's new. We may have to have an expansion.
No, industrial property doesn't have to be subdivisions, but it might.
That's what we're banking on, Preston. I've asked this over and over in council meetings, that most of the funding we're getting is coming from that property being turned into homes.
It doesn't make any difference if it's turned into homes or industrial. We still get the bang for the buck in the urban renewal. It doesn't have to.
The
be
estimate
res-
was from homes
Yeah.
being a lot denser, so. I just, yeah, I think that could have been a little better plan.
Okay, I'm gonna call for a motion.
I move to approve resolution 2022-12, inflationary indexing for water, transportation and parks, SDCs effective October 1st, 2022.
Can I have a second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Right.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
2 nays, 3 yeses, we're ready to go. Okay. Kevin has brought to us the discussion of the possible code revisions. So I'm gonna ask him to come out here and take over the podium or the seat, whatever he wants.
So in your packets, Robert and I put together a list of some of the more common things we run into that we think need to get fixed. So what we're looking for is either direction if you guys want to prioritize some of these, put these in an order. If there's other code sections that you guys have seen that would like to get fixed. These are our recommended ones that we'll work on. If there's items on here that you don't want us to work on, I don't want to go down that road and spend a lot of time on things that council's doesn't intend to adopt. Because that's, a waste of staff time and a waste of money with our attorney, because all of these are gonna have to be reviewed by our attorney. And some of them, even a few of the parking ones are probably gonna take a little more work than it looks, because there have been even recent court cases on what you can and can't do when citing somebody for parking violations and things like that. So that's gonna take a little bit of work. Some of the sections that are newer, parking around corners is a kind of a little bit of a hot button issue for some of our residents. However, we also have some streets that are nothing but corners. So we're gonna have to take a look at that and make sure that we write it as an equitable solution across the city. Because we don't want to make an entire street no parking if we can avoid it, but we also want to make the corners that need it. like-
Dunaway Road.
Dunaway is
The whole
no
thing.
parking.
Yeah. So,
White that, yellow right off of there, like, get rid of that yellow.
yeah, so that's a very specific one that we.
That one burns, that's why. That's a hard hitting one. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we're looking
It
for.
doesn't matter. It's a huge impact for people that do.
And if council said, yeah, let's move forward the list, we would invest into the code language and bring you back for a discussion, the actual code language changes.
Does any council have any specific codes that they want looked at?
I have questions about some of the ones on the list.
Okay.
Is this a good time for that?
Yes.
So I had to look up a lot of all of these. It might have been helpful to have maybe a brief summary of each one, because I had to go through and look them all up. So the one that says, it's in reference to chapter 6.105 and moving, the increase the distance of parking restriction from 200 to 500 feet. That's in reference to how far you have to move your car out of the same area for 72 hours or something like that, every 24, whatever the time frame is.
Correct.
How does that impact people who live on a street and need to park their car? You've got a driveway for 2 cars, you've got 2 adults and 2 teenage drivers, you might have more than 2 cars. You might have to park a vehicle on the street. If you have a neighbor that doesn't care for you and wants to report your vehicle that's always parked on the street, how does that impact them?
They would have to move that every 72 hours to a different.
Answers that question for me. Okay, for the next one. 6.11, include boats and RVs in prohibition. Would this exclude them from ever parking on the street?
So right now, we don't have any language in the code specific to boats and boat trailers. Right now, we enforce it under the trailer definitions, which in itself needs to be updated. So what we're talking about with that is making boat trailers and things like that more comparable to RVs. RVs can be on the road on the street for 24 hours. And the idea behind that is people can park in front of their house, boat up, and go on their trip.
Okay.
So that's really what it is widening out that statute, or that total.
Kevin, does that also apply for, would you make unattached boats without a timeline? Because like unattached travel trailers, you're not supposed to be on the street at any time.
And that one, because those fall under the definition of RVs, they are a 24-hour visit. So boat trailers and things like that, there's nothing on here that has an unlimited duration that you can park on the street. Any kind of vehicle, anything has to be, it's with either defined as a vehicle or as a recreational vehicle or as a trailer. So boats, detached boat trailers, detached RVs, they would get lumped in and treated the same.
So it says, this is 6.105, and then 7, an unmounted camper on any street or right of way, and that doesn't have any time.
Right, a camper is not defined as an RV because it doesn't have wheels of its own.
Oh, so that's the kind that's just like back of the pickup.
Right.
Okay.
That's what that one's talking about. And that one, because they're not sturdy on their own, they're a hazard for everybody.
Yeah, that could be dangerous.
My next question was about, I've got 2 more, sorry.
No, go ahead.
My next question was about the prohibit camping on private property. So if I have a gaggle of Cub Scouts that want to have a camp out in the backyard.
So that one is going to be a difficult one to write. What we're looking at here is more the people who have set up almost unofficial camps in their front yards. And that specific example is one I brought up to Robert when he suggested this. Because we don't want to prohibit people from, kids from camping in their backyard. And I love doing that as a kid. And that's not what we're talking about here. So it may be something that we define by the location, front yard, side yard, visible from right of way or something like that if we want to do that. But primarily it's to keep front yards from becoming tent camps.
Is that also something that we could add a time limit, like the RVs are allowed for a certain amount of time, camping, could be allowed for a certain amount of time, that would take care of the difference between the Cub Scouts and the vagrants, basically, the difference between them. Time frame might be an easier solution.
Would it also be good to, you wouldn't need a written necessarily, but to have permission of the owner, right? So if the person that's camping is the owner, that's not going to be a problem. But if it's just somebody that comes on off and has a tent and says, hey, can I stay? Or if there's a tenant that says.
And then you end up with all sorts of squatter
Yeah, I was
rights
gonna say,
issues.
that's already
another thing.
prohibited under trespassing statutes.
Okay, so you're targeting people that own their house and that just set up tents.
Essentially turn their front yard into a tented living situation, not somebody who, not somebody who's just throwing it up overnight for their kids, but more somebody who's intending that for long-term stays.
Okay.
We've had a few properties in town where we've had to push that off. And we dealt with it under the nuisance statute, but typically these are more defensible if you can be more specific.
I think a timeline would probably be the most appropriate then.
My last question is not on the last one. It says it's a new one under storage of vehicle, add a section on pods or storage containers. Was the intent to allow them, do it with a permit for limited amount of time, outright prohibit them?
So we've kicked it around a couple of times. I think most likely we would go through a permit process with a limited time. Because they're a great solution for people remodeling a kitchen, which is where this actually came up. Put everything out there in your kitchen, take a week to remodel and then get it back in. The particular remodel took almost 1.5 years, so it wasn't quite appropriate to have that there, but we didn't have a tool to address it very well.
Is that specifically for on their own premises, or is that specifically for on the street?
Street.
Okay.
On street.
Because that's not.
These are all
Here.
in regards to street
Yeah.
public right away in the front yard.
Correct.
camping.
Well, with the exception
From what
of
I,
camping.
yeah, I think that was the only one that wasn't.
Well, those pods can create a safety issue because you can't see around.
No, I understand the reasoning behind it. I just want clarity on what
Yeah, it's similar to, you can park an RV for any duration on your property, provided it's properly cited. So this is kind of similar to that, and that's the sort of language we would probably try and reflect. Because again, creating consistency and specificity makes these a lot much more defensible when they're challenged, and they will be.
Kevin, do the first three address the issue of parking cars, including abandoned cars down here on Third Street and getting them removed?
They would.
That's a big thing.
Number 4 too, right? Is that?
That's kind of what I was wondering, but again, they just weren't overly specific, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we already have that prohibition against operable vehicles, so
But
that,
the problem is the wording is not good
right.
and it's not being enforced. It's really not enforceable.
Well, and some of that has to do with availability of towing, and that's something the sheriff's office runs into a little bit because not all tow operators want to come out here on our timeline. Sometimes it's, oh, well, next time I send a truck through there, I'll see if it's still there. And I'm not completely up on the sheriff's tow regulations, so I don't know. They've got some very specific guidelines that they have to follow as well. But that's something that, abandoned vehicles, when we know them, and because Robert's out moving around through the city, we see a lot more of them than we ever used to. And we're getting more of them tagged and getting them moved around. But that's something that we're actually gonna move forward on a little bit more aggressively now that we've got some of the bigger items cleaned up.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some we chase around town because they're not quite abandoned, but every time we tag it, they move it somewhere else, and that restarts their clock. And that kind of plays into that distance change as well, which may or may not be something that works out well. But yeah, we kind of play hide and seek with some of our frequent offenders on that one. Yeah, there was that situation with one of the residents in a building downtown that doesn't have any parking, and that was something we kind of struggled with, but we're paying much closer attention to it than we have
I think
been.
that's my biggest concern is how it impacts people who have limited parking.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to cite the entirety of Grant Street for sure. Nobody's gonna appreciate that. They don't wanna play ring around the rosy and with their cars.
Well, and I get that, but I more mean like the car that was on Third Street and had slashed tires.
It's unfortunate that, but it seems like if it was a non-functional vehicle with slashed tires, that could be addressed through other means.
And that's what- that's
You have
actually
to
what-
move it, not 200 feet, 500.
That's what I'm actually was focusing on. That's why I want to make sure that that encompasses that.
You might recall, Kayla, that also the League of Oregon Cities is trying to push statute to more easily remove abandoned vehicles.
Well, and I know that was part of the problem. We had state statute issues and then the coding issues. So that's why I just want to make sure because.
Yeah, and that's where recent case law is, in some instances, is made a little bit different because in some instances, we actually have to make direct contact with these vehicles owner before we can remove them. So it's made it more difficult but you know how that is with appeals courts.
Can I stop for a minute, please? Hillary?
Hillary Malcolmson, 915 Grant Street. So the 200 to 500 distance concerns me as a citizen. That I don't think it solves anything. It just makes it a different puzzle piece. And for me as a resident where we live right past where there seems to be a major congestion of cars parked, I don't know how they get them parked so close to each other. I'm concerned that their cars are gonna start moving farther and farther down the street. And so to me, that's just passing. So, the buck onto the resident. There's reasons that some of us stay quiet. There's a cul-de-sac 9th where it's a drive-through cul-de-sac. It's not a dead-end cul-de-sac. And they park 2-3 cars into the cul-de-sac. And we realize if we all make complaints, their cars are gonna impede us. So anyway, there's gotta be some, I'm just concerned that the rules are to, help, but not really take care of the issue.
Well, and parking congestion in a residential area is something that almost all cities struggle with. I lived for almost 20 years in Corvallis, and there wasn't more than a month that went by that there wasn't some flare up and blow up over parking in residential areas. And that's something that's been my concern as well in doing this is, you know, the stringing out the impact. Because if you move folks out of one neighborhood, it goes into another, and then it's a domino effect, and it sort of gets
For me,
really unmanageable.
For me, the real focus is really on those abandoned vehicles that are full of trash, that are flat tires, you know, because I get it. I mean, I live on Dunaway Road. There's no parking there.
You can't park on your street.
I know. So I get it. I sympathize. But I just don't want to walk that far. But I mean, I get it. But for me, it's more, that's the focus that I would like to see us focus on.
But that's the intent, right? If cars that aren't used, but you can't just say, well, as long as it leaves and comes back, because then you would drive around the block and put it right back there. But
Well, I have to say, me and Greg watched this happen for almost a year, when there was 3 or 4 cars that were very expired, flat tires, everything, and they just played hopscotch from one parking lot to another, across the street. I mean, they go and pump up that tire just enough to roll it to the next parking spot. So going a little bit further makes that a little bit more difficult, and therefore, over the time after Robert did pursue the avenues of the code enforcement, I think 3 of the cars are gone.
Yeah, it's a lot better.
It's a lot better.
And the expiration of the moratorium on enforcement against expired tags made a big
Expired.
difference.
Yeah.
So now that we can enforce those rules again,
Yeah.
it's easier for us to attack those.
Okay, so what kind of direction would you like to give Kevin?
That was my direction.
I support everything except for the 200 to 500 foot one, the moving of vehicles.
I think if we
I
can
don't support.
limit that
one.
to maybe abandoned vehicle, I think it should stay. So when we have the discussion to limit it to abandoned vehicles, I don't think it should apply to all vehicles.
So do you want him to work on these ordinances and then bring them back to us rewritten as the way, then we can critique that and make any final changes?
Yeah, and my understanding is the city attorney was happy to look into some of the other local municipalities in drafting these codes and proposing some different revisions.
And that's typically one of our first steps is to reach out to the other cities to see if they've got language we like, because that just speeds the process and gets things done.
Well, I agree with Kayla's statement about the 300 or the 200 to 500 being more restrictive.
Well, that's why I don't want it to go away. Like,
It's not.
I agree with you, but
Yeah.
there are certain situations where that.
No, I
does
don't
need
think it should go away completely, but I don't think it should be something that's being enforced on moving vehicles, people that live in.
Oh, yeah, I totally
Like,
agree on that.
You know, I'm not park my car in front of my house. That's just where it's gonna go.
And you should be allowed to do that.
Yes.
As long as they're licensed, yeah, you bet.
Yeah, and so the kind of the way we're approaching enforcement on that now is we're looking at these more as people who are storing cars in the right of way rather than, to your example, the teenage drivers. Well, if they're driving that to school every day and it's moving and leaving every day, we don't count that as having sat there for 72 hours, even though we may have, you know, somebody may see it there every night at 6:30, but if it's gone when we go look at it at noon, that meets the code. So.
That's why we need restrictive language limiting it to prevent that.
right, because if somebody gets a ticket for storing it that they haven't, then they say, well, wait a second, there's this car that don't move.
Yeah,
And then they don't have to pay a ticket. And then,
Well, we have the typical tools of, you know, putting a little chalk mark on a tire and things like that. Robert's got a lot of experience in doing things like this, so he's got a number of ways that he tracks whether cars have actually moved or not. And
isn't it shocking?
My-
Thought that wasn't allowed anymore.
Yeah, I guess my thing is more let's try to eliminate him having to waste his time on pointless situations, because I mean, people can get sick for a week and not move their car, like leave them alone. But if you want to have expired tags, a vehicle that's not working, full of trash, attracting flies and rats, like, no, that needs to be addressed.
yeah, and that's really what Robert focuses on when he's going around. When it's cars that are in good repair and license, that's typically driven by a complaint from a neighbor.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to do things like check on it every day.
But that's what I'm saying, like, if we're gonna rewrite these codes, like, we should rewrite these codes to account for that, so he doesn't have to keep doing that.
Give it a shot.
Kevin,
I know it's gonna be hard, but
Was there any discussion with you and Robert about other, like sidewalk obstructions or you going through town, you know, there's branches or stuff that, you know, cross into the sidewalk, make it unwalkable, or people store
Walk the
things
stop
or,
sign.
you know, just various things that aren't necessarily vehicle related, which, you know, rightfully so, this is focused heavily on that, but was there any discussion or?
So we do have language on the sidewalks and things like that. We do have, so things like if somebody's tree is blocking a sidewalk, it's hanging too low or something like that. What we do is we send Public Works over and they knock on the door and say, hey, either you can take care of this or we will.
And then you
Yeah.
charge them after.
If it's something major, like we've got to take a tree down, then sometimes yes. If it's just taking down a branch, it takes them, you know, 2-3 minutes to do it.
Okay.
So we don't typically do that. We have the authority to. But so vegetative things like that, we take care of all the time.
Okay.
You know, one of the big ones is the swath of empty land next to the school. That gets overgrown quite frequently, so our guys
Been
go by
overgrown.
there. Yeah, so our guys go by there and chop it back off the right of way, things like that. We do have pretty strong language about blocking the rights of way, which includes streets, sidewalks, even undeveloped rights of way. So I think we have the tools on that one, and we've been pretty successful with that.
Okay.
So I think that one's.
What about maintaining the vision clearance on corners? Because I there's a lot of intersections where one corner or another, whether there's a stop sign there or not, it's in very high violation of that visibility requirements.
Well, and that's something we address it either as we see it or as we get a complaint. And
Okay,
it's the same thing with blocking the sidewalk. We have Public Works go take a look at it and make sure that it's, if it needs to get cut down, then we work with the homeowner to get that done.
but the tools are there to make it pretty successful. Okay,
You know what I would like to see as we make these changes and update these ordinances, that in our newsletter, we have a ordinance corner.
Mhm.
Where this month, we're gonna talk about the parking ordinance, you know, this is.
Kind of doing that with monthly,
Yeah.
code
Yeah.
enforcement is what it's.
Yeah, and we've got a couple planned out for the next couple months.
Good,
And that's because we don't like to make major changes with these and not give people fair opportunity to comply.
right.
And that's really what the goal is compliance. I don't want to cite anybody unless we absolutely have to. And so far, we've not had to cite very many people, but we've had a few people that have been very recalcitrant. They've been an extreme minority.
Well, I think by changing the ordinance and getting the ordinance officer, I think that people are seeing that the city cares. And the city is actually looking a lot better than it did. We've made a lot, you guys have made a lot of progress.
Yeah, Robert's done a lot of great work and a lot of the violations were simply people didn't know.
Yeah,
And so, you know, and he does a great job working with them to get things corrected rather than, you know, feel like the city's just cracking down on them out of the blue. So, and most people, you know, once you tell them there's a rule, it's, oh, okay, I just didn't know. And it doesn't happen again. We've always got the few, we're always gonna have to lean on every couple of months.
okay, so do you have the direction that you need?
I think so.
Okay, does anybody else want to give a specific direction? Okay, thank you, Kevin, appreciate your commitment to that. Okay, so that brings us down to Public Works water consumption. Now, we don't have we don't have the actual water consumption report yet because that's being redesigned. The one that we usually see, yeah. It's being redesigned because now that we've got all of the meters and the pumps and everything installed, we can start taking good figures and knowing if we're losing water or what's going on. So there's not much there. Anybody have any questions about the Public Works area? Now, you've been short a person. Have you hired one?
No, we're looking at a final interview for a maintenance worker next week.
And then you'll be fully staffed.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay.
What is the status of the bathrooms at Perkins?
And cameras.
They should be.
There were sheriff there this morning.
I said, the cameras are supposed to be in, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Great.
What, were they vandalized again? Is that why the sheriffs were there this morning?
Yes, but not like in the past where we, have to keep it locked or something. It was another kind of vandalism.
Do we have it on tape, on,
So, yes,
good.
Yeah.
Did they
Excellent.
break the camera?
no,
Oh, okay. I was just wondering if the way you said that.
no, it was restroom related. Yes.
Okay.
I've seen cameras where they put them in cages so people can't hurt them. Maybe we should look at something like that so that we don't lose those cameras.
We can do that.
That's just a suggestion, because I wouldn't want to have them, destroy those cameras. Okay, anything else as far as public work goes? Now, we've already done the fire. The accounts payable, we got the printouts in your on your desk when you were here. Does anybody have questions about those? Okay, then Preston, you're on.
Well, Your Honor, I just have one other thing to mention that's and I might already know, but that was the second payment of our ARPA money, the second half did come in late last month. So I'll good news. And we'll have a discussion item on ARPA funds next month.
Right. And everything is set up for the ballot measure for the reservoir?
To be on the ballot, yes. As far as the information that goes out, that's still being worked on. So October meeting, you'll have a chance to finalize those couple of communications around that.
Anybody else have any questions?
I have a few questions about the ordinance report, but I'll work with Preston directly or Robert.
Are we meeting? Is Scott coming to October meeting?
I would think that he would be. I know that I talked to him a couple of weeks ago and he had two people at that time. No, I haven't touched bases with him in the last week or two, but I will in the next week or so and find out how many we're looking at, but we're probably going to do something there. We may have to have a special session in October for that stuff.
That is the plan. Have an executive session at the October meeting.
Okay, an executive at the October. Okay, that's good. Okay. So that's already planned then?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, any committee reports? Any counselor reports? No mayor reports. Okay, can I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn. I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for all of your help, guys. Good meeting.
Yeah.
Yes,
ma'am.
Right.
You gotta bring a ruler next time.